Hello, and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which consists of 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or storytelling in some form. So I am up early with my 6 things, as usual, and I am ready to get started. Number 1, so I have lots of news this morning to share about the Firmament series, and number 1 is that I finished up the Gestern revision, so that's book 5, and that after this there's only one more sort of major revision, because number 6 I'm gonna do another big, go through, and fix it up. But then book 7 was just published a few months ago, so I don't feel the need to give it a big edit. I don't think there's too much that I've learned since then. So I'll just kind of give it a quick once over. And then book 8, which isn't even out yet, which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, I'm going to be so excited to have this project done. And going through book 5 was more fun than I was expecting. I don't know what, that one is very different from the rest of the series. It's one where they spend almost all of the book on Earth, and they're like hiking through the woods and finding things in abandoned old castles. It's very different than the rest of the series, where they're in space and all that, or on other planets at least. So it's definitely a bit of an outlier, but it has so many important developments, really huge developments and character things that go on in it for the rest of the series. And going back through it, I feel like it was a pretty solid story. And then also that was one challenge I did have, was making sure, this is still sci-fi because a story about people, like I said, hiking through the woods of Austria, that in a science fiction series, like I had to intentionally go back when I published it, just when I was originally editing it, and make sure I was inserting, new technology and things about how the world has changed, and like really kind of digging into my world building, even though that's not really my favorite part of storytelling. It has to be done. And so, yeah, hopefully I accomplished that. Hopefully it feels, and actually the one I'm working on right now, book 6, which is No Man, which is one of my favorites in the series. So in No Man, half of it is Andy and her dad and her brother out in space, desperately trying to find something they need. But then the other half is actually told from the perspective of 2 of her friends who are still on Earth, trying to get away from assassins. So very exciting. But it was the first. I had small portions in some of the other books that were told in third person, but this was definitely the biggest application of that, because like I said, it's basically half the book. But writing that part was so much fun, because I love the 2 characters whose perspectives we're in for those parts, and I love the story that unfolds and the relationship that develops between them. And it was just an absolute delight to write, although also very, very sad, because it's a sad story in some ways. I'm not going to give any spoilers. But anyway, I'm having fun going through that one as well. But again, I wanted to make sure that it feels like we're in a very futuristic Earth, so that it's not like we're suddenly not even in a science fiction series anymore. So hopefully I accomplished that. But either way, getting so close to being done with this revision project, and I'm going to be so happy when it's finally done, and happy that I finally just buckled down and did it. Number 2, also on the Firmament series news, I finally got the revised new edition of the first book, Radialloy, up on Amazon. So the new edition is up on both Kindle and paperback. I'm going to start promoting it soon, and I'm so happy. I'm going to feel so much more comfortable promoting it because it's better. And also now I have things in the back that can hopefully help propel readers into the rest of the series. Like I have a little sample chapter, information about how you can get the second book for free in my newsletter, things like that. So I'm really excited to hopefully get some more momentum going on promoting the series, and also just excited that my readers hopefully have a better product. So yeah, and then my formatter is working on getting book 2 together, and hopefully we'll be able to roll them out pretty quickly after this. It's all very exciting. And then number 3, still on the series, because that is just my whole life these days, as professionally, basically. Book 8, which is Humanoid, which I've been releasing on Kindle Vella. I just got the last chapter up on Vella yesterday. So that book's run on Kindle Vella is complete, which means I can, in 30 days, I can put the actual book, like the paperback and everything, out. And so I'm going to start working on that, just kind of give the book a quick, once over, get it off to my formatter, make sure that any finishing details I need to put on the cover, things like that. So all kinds of exciting developments. And one thing I still want to do, this will be a little bonus thing. It's not one of my 6 things, but I still really want to, I'm going to need to make a new audiobook for book 1, because for one thing, the quality of the old one is just not that great, but also it's just been so edited since then. And then also I want to get around to doing audiobooks for the rest of them, so I need to figure out some system for that. But anyway, lots of very exciting news for this series, and I'm gonna, like I said, start sharing more on social media about my progress with these revisions and how you can get the new editions and things like that. So yay, thank you for listening to all my updates. I am very excited to be making so much progress on this. Number 4, my middle daughter, April, who is 3, pretty recently dropped her afternoon nap. So she already hadn't been napping that much for a while, although she held on to her nap for a pretty long time, I feel like. But it got to where she wouldn't sleep for most of the afternoon. For most of nap time, she would just play in her bed, and then she would fall asleep like 10 to 15 minutes before rest time was over, which was really just not helpful, because then you would have to wake her up, and she was just cranky, and she didn't sleep as well at night and whatever. So clearly it was time. And I was dreading the transition a little bit, but it's been really, really good, because, like I said, she sleeps better and is less cranky after nap time. But also she really enjoys having some time to herself just to play, because she's my girl who loves to just set things up just so. Like she'll take little toys or toy food or, blocks or Legos or whatever, and just set them up in like a very specific way and organize them into a little story. And she loves to do that. But then if her sisters are around, they're of course going to get into it and mess it up, because they're also trying to play. And so she really, I think, is thriving on having that few hours in the afternoon to herself to just set up all her stuff however she wants it. But one thing I'd noticed the last few days, she was starting to take literally almost all the books off the bookshelf in the afternoons, and she would like sit on her bed and just read them, which is fine, but I was kind of like, oh baby, maybe you don't need every single book. But whatever. I hadn't really made any hard and fast rules about it. And then yesterday I go in there after rest time to just like say hi and see how she's doing and tell her to start cleaning up. And she has again taken every single book off the shelf, but instead of just piling them up and reading them, she had laid them all over the floor. They covered almost the entire floor of her room, which is pretty big. And they were all fitted together in this like mosaic too. I mean, it really was kind of amazing, but also it was just quite a sight to behold. I definitely took some pictures. And so I told her, hey, I see you worked really hard on this. What a great job you did arranging those. But we're not going to do that anymore, okay? These books are not really for being on the floor and getting stepped on, and we don't really need all of them to be out at once every day. So we're going to start having like maybe just, 5 books at a time, and then they get put away if and get some more or something like that. Some rules to maybe limit this, but it was very creative, and I did want to make sure that she wasn't breaking any rules, so I praised her for her hard work on that project. But we're gonna maybe limit how many books can be gotten out, and make sure we know books are for reading, not for laying all over the floor and stepping on. But yeah, it was quite something to walk in on. So number 5, am I currently reading? This is kind of an interesting one. So I finished one book, and then the next book I was planning to read, I'm waiting for it to be on hold at the library. So I just thought I would pick a small book for my collection, and what happened to be next on my shelf was A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, which is a very small book, and I always love anything by Lewis, so I thought that sounds perfect. And I knew what it was about. It's what book he wrote processing his grief after his wife passed away. So I read probably like half of it yesterday. It's a very small book, but it's just interesting so far because it's so different from any other Lewis work that I've ever read. And I don't know what I was expecting because, like I said, I knew what it was about, but most of his work is just so intellectual and so, I don't know, developed in the ideas that he's communicating and things like that. And this is not that at all. Like, this is just like, it literally is the pages of his journal as he works through this grief. And so it's very raw, and it's very hard to read in some places because his struggle is so severe. I mean, and that's one thing I think I would do better to read it again, reread it, because I have never been through, praise God, never been through an event like with that type of grief, like losing a spouse. And so I think it would mean more to me if I myself were going through something like that. But even as it is, it's so interesting to see that unfold in someone who, like I said, I so respect all his writing and don't agree with him on everything, but respect his ideas and things like that. And he is really, like, is she even in heaven? Like, where is God? Is God good? Like, really, truly, like, digging into these questions. And so I'll be curious too to see how it develops in the end, because we also have so many examples like this in scripture, in the Psalms, and then in my Bible study we just finished going through Jeremiah and Lamentations, which are full of grief, but then in the end always turning it back to our hope in the Lord. And so, like I said, I've read about half of this one, and I'll be curious to see how the second half wraps up. But it's just so interesting to see something so personal, and I really admire the fact that he was willing to put it out there, because I think that would be a very kind of scary thing to do. First of all, just to put yourself out there like that, but also to do it when you have this reputation as being this intellectual, Christian leader and teacher. So anyway, very interesting, and I'm curious how it wraps up. But I'm glad I decided to read it, and now we'll see how it goes. So number 6, my husband and I have been watching through the new Lost in Space show on Netflix. So I watched the first and second seasons back when they came out, but it was quite a few years ago. And a third season came out kind of recently, but I didn't really remember stuff from the first 2 seasons that well. So I decided I'd just go through and rewatch it because, the seasons are not that long, and I really liked it. And so thought I would just catch up that way. And then my husband decided to watch it with me because he hadn't seen it before. So we've been having fun going through that. And it's a really sweet show. Just so family oriented and clean, but yet so gripping and adventurous, and just, it's a lot of fun to watch. Really well done, and really good writing and storytelling, in my opinion. But one thing that I've noticed several times as we've been going through it, which has been interesting, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers that are too specific, but the show's been out for quite a while, so hopefully if you wanted to see it, you've seen it already. But I've noticed a few times there have been story developments where the characters will take some kind of huge risk or, go do something, quite dangerous or whatever, but then it seems like it has not paid off, like at all. And at first, in a couple of these storylines, I was like, well, why did they even have that in there? Like, they'll have all this excitement, and it seems like it was just all for nothing. Like, I'm going to give an example from season 1. Some of the characters go off to retrieve some fuel that they need to get their ships off the planet. And they get there, it's super dangerous. They manage to get the fuel, they're heading back home, and there's an accident that overturns the vehicle carrying the fuel onto one of the people. And so their leader is saying, well, we have to, and there's this whole, of course, thing where it's like, fell on this rock on the way down that punctured the side of the tank, and so if they move it, all the fuel is going to come out, but if they leave it, the guy is crushed under it, is definitely going to die, blah blah blah. So the leader is saying we have to leave it until we can get a way to get the fuel out, because we need it. Like, we need it to get all these people off the planet. And there's a character who's a very young doctor who says, no, we have to move it and save this man's life, and ends up kind of taking things into her own hands and getting the guy out from under, and they do lose like almost all of the fuel. And then they go back, and I'm like, well, like, that whole journey for nothing, but at least they saved this man's life. And then again, huge spoiler, no, the man does end up dying on the way back. So at first I was like, well, why did they do that? Like, it was all this drama and excitement to watch, but like, it seems so pointless. But then watching things continue to unfold, and again, this is my second time watching it, but I have a really bad memory, so I remembered almost none of this. It does, because they had like this tiny bit of fuel still, and some people in the settlement try to use it in a certain way. It ends up propelling the plot forward into a different direction, and also revealing things we need to know about the planet and about some of the characters and things like that. And then that has happened, something similar to that has happened multiple times throughout the series, and it's been kind of instructive, I think, for me to see, because there was another time recently, and I won't get into spoilers on this one, but where a couple of characters were trying to find something out, went through all this risk, and ended up, oh yeah, there was nothing there. And at first it was like, well, what was the point of that? But then it did end up in a very indirect but very necessary way, propelling them into this next part of the plot, which led to a whole bunch of character and relationship development. So that's been interesting to watch, because I think I've also seen plenty of examples in movies and shows where they do something that's completely pointless, and I'm like, that was just in there because they wanted to put it in there, but it doesn't serve the story at all, and that's always frustrating. And I think even for viewers that can't put their finger on why it's wrong, like, they just know that there's a disappointment when something that you just really put yourself through is completely pointless. So it's been interesting to see